Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars, and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about a project that I've wanted to do for a long time. In fact, this is going to probably be a multi-part series because I think it will be too long to feature in just one video. And what that project is the start to finish construction of a Highline Guitars Horn of Plenty bass guitar. That's right, I'm going to build a bass guitar, and I'm going to let you follow along from start to finish. And I'm not sure how many parts that's going to take, 3 to 4 maybe. But what I'm going to do in this part is I'm going to start with the plan that I created for this guitar, and I'm going to take you through the process of making all the blanks that I'm going to need for the body, the neck, and the fretboard. Now, some of you may be aware of another website that I have called eguitarplans.com. And on that website, I sell plans for a variety of different types of electric guitars. And one of those sets of plans is for what I call the Horn of Plenty bass guitar. And that's the guitar that I'm going to build. So before we start doing the cutting, carving, and sanding and all that work, let's go inside and I'll show you what this plan looks like and how I'm going to be using it to build this guitar. Well, here we are back at my computer. And before I can do any cutting, carving, and sanding on a guitar, I have to have a plan. So what I'll do is I'll sit here at my computer and I will draw a full-size, full-scale, usually starting out with a top view of the guitar that I want to build. And there's several reasons why I feel the need to do that. First of all, in this day and age, there are so many different styles of guitars. There are different components, different bridges, different pickups, different kinds of tuners. There are different concepts in terms of tuner arrangement, fret arrangement, pickup placement, control cavity arrangement and placement. All these different ideas that when you bring them together, it's really important to be able to check how all of these different components and features and ideas are going to work together. Because if you're not careful, there's always a possibility that as you get further into the build that you'll discover that a decision you made in your mind isn't necessarily going to work in reality. So having a drawing on my computer allows me to check those relationships before I get too far. So what I'll do is I'll start in, I like to use Adobe Illustrator because it produces a vector-based drawing that I can use in other parts of my building process. But what I'll do is I'll create a top-down two-dimensional view of the guitar. And what I look for initially is to make sure that I even like the design. And once I'm happy with the basic design of the guitar, I'll start to check all the different relationships. You know, for example, I want to make sure that my string spread at the bridge isn't too wide for the fretboard that I'm going to use. Another example would be the placement of my tuners. If I want to do a straight pull as I'm doing here on this guitar, I want to make sure that the placement of the tuners is going to work and that those tuners aren't going to bump into each other when they're installed. Once I'm satisfied that all this is done, the next thing that I can do is I can export the different elements like the body, the neck, and the fretboard and import those into my 3D CAD program. And in this case, I use Rhinoceros 3D. And what that program does is it allows me to create a full-size, full-scale 3D mock-up on the computer of, for example, this is the body, and then I can also do the neck. And with these files, I can then export them as a .stl, which stands for stereolithograph, and I can open those in my CAM program, which in this case is MeshCam. And what that does is, you know, this is basically what the 3D model looks like when it's imported into MeshCam. But then what I can do is I can tell the program what the performance is of my CNC machine, as well as the type of bit that I'm going to use. And then it will create a tool path for cutting out the guitar body. Now, typically with each component that I'm going to be using or that I'm going to be making, I'll have 3 to 4 different tool paths. And when each of those tool paths is created by Meshcam, they are saved to the computer as what's known as a G-code file. And those G-code files are essentially, when you look at a G-code file, it's just a list of numbers. And those numbers are coordinates. And that's what tells the CNC machine where to move the router to carve the shape. And each component will have, like I said, 4 to 5 G-code files in order to cut that shape. And later on, those will be sent to the CNC machine as I begin the process of cutting each part. Now, I know a lot of you were hoping, or maybe were hoping, that this would be a video on how to build a bass using traditional hand tools and that sort of thing. And I moved away from hand tools a number of years ago because I got to a point where I was making so many guitars, it was really putting a lot of wear and tear on my neck, back, and shoulders. And I decided that if I wanted to continue doing this, I was going to have to incorporate CNC technology into my guitar building. And ever since I did that, my neck, back, shoulders, and elbows have been really thankful for that. So this is really going to be more of a video series about using modern technology to build guitars. And another way to think of it is, if you go this sort of a route, you're going to be exchanging your old school hand building skills for modern high-tech skills. And I will tell you right now, this approach takes quite a bit of effort and time to learn how to do it. It's not a simple process. So, but hopefully this video and the videos that will follow will kind of give you an idea of everything that's involved. And it will either inspire you to go the CNC route, or it will inspire you to stick with what you're doing, building with hand tools, because in the end, you get the same thing. Now, once I have finished working on the computer, I'm ready to head out to the shop to get started working. But before I can fire up the CNC machine, I need to prepare blanks. And I'm going to make a blank for the body, my book match top, a neck, and a fretboard. And then once those are finished, I can actually start sending G-code to the CNC machine and start carving all those different parts. So let's head out there and get started. To keep the cost of my guitars down, one of the things I like to do is process my own blanks rather than buy blanks that are made by someone else. And to do that, I have to cut lengths of wood to size and prepare the blanks for further machining work. And here what I'm doing is cutting the first of 2 lengths of African mahogany, which will be used to make the body blank. And not only do I need to cut the length of the board, but I also have to cut it to the proper width. And here I'm doing that with my bandsaw. Next, I'll measure the length of maple that I'll need for the guitar neck. And in this case, the neck blank will be 36 inches long, 5 inches wide, and about 1 inch thick. I think that this bass guitar body would look really nice with a book-matched walnut top. So I picked a board that I had in my stash, which has a really nice grain pattern, and I'm running it through the bandsaw, cutting along the overall thickness's center line. And once I've made this cut, I can then open the 2 pieces like a book, hence the term book-matched. And I think that this ought to look really nice on this body. Now, once I have all the boards cut to the proper length and width, I've got to run them through my planer to bring them down to the proper thickness. And here I'm planing the body blank, which will be brought down to about 1.5 inch thickness. And the neck blank is going to be planed down to a thickness of 1 inch. Each side of the book match top will be planed down to a thickness of 1/4 of an inch. So when glued to the top of the body will have an overall thickness of 1 3/4 inches. And next up is the fretboard blank, which will be planed down to 1/4 of an inch thickness. And finally, there's the control cavity cover, which will be planed down to 1/8 of an inch. Once the boards have all been planed, I can really see the grain pattern, and that helps me to figure out which edge would make the best gluing edge when preparing the blank. Before the blanks can be glued together, I have to run the edges through my joiner to make sure that they're square with the tops. And to avoid confusion, I'll make sure to mark each side of the blank. Before I can run the boards through the joiner, I need to make sure that the fence is square with the table. It only takes 2 or 3 passes over the joiner blades to square the gluing edge, and I'll do the same thing with my book match tops so that I have a nice glue seam with no gaps. I pretty much make all my guitars with an angled headstock, and for this bass I'm going to have a 13-degree angled headstock. And to accomplish this, what I'll do is consult my plan to figure out exactly where I need to make the angled cut for the scarf joint. So once I've got that figured out, I can mark the blank and then draw the line that I need to follow when I cut it with my bandsaw. That's really important when you make a cut like this to make sure that the blade is square with the table. I'll use my carpenter's square to make sure that the board is parallel to the blade as I make the angled cut through the stock. I use a little handheld belt sander to make sure that that angle cut is as smooth as possible before I glue it up. And I like to check my progress with the straight edge of my carpenter square to make sure that it is flat and smooth. Gluing up a scarf joint can be kind of tricky because the two pieces tend to want to slide around when you clamp them. So what I like to do is temporarily clamp them into place, and then I'll drill a hole towards the edge on each side, and then I can insert a couple of wood screws which serve as locating pins as well as a way to prevent those two pieces from sliding as I clamp them together during the gluing process. I like to use Titebond Original Wood Glue, which works just fine for this kind of a joint. And I'll put just enough on there to do the job, and then I'll spread it around and get the surface consistently coated. Next, I'll attach the headstock and use those screws to help locate the position, and then I'll just partially screw them into place so that the headstock won't slip when I start to apply pressure from the clamps. And I typically like to clamp toward the center of the blank. That's where the neck is actually going to be carved from. So I want to make sure that that's where the majority of the bond is taking place. While the headstock scarf joint is drying, I can go ahead and glue together the two sides of my book-matched walnut top. And it's a pretty straightforward process. I just apply the glue, and then I'll use 3 pipe clamps to clamp the 2 pieces together. However, you've got to be careful here because when you apply that clamping pressure from the side, there's always a possibility that one of those sides could slide up on the other, and you end up with an uneven seam. So to prevent that, I'm just using a couple of pieces of scrap wood crossing over that seam, and then I'm clamping those into place. And that does a pretty good job of holding those 2 pieces level with one another as I apply that clamping pressure to the sides. I only have one set of clamps for my guitar body blanks and my book match tops. So once the top has been allowed to dry for a couple of hours, I'll take it out, set it aside, and then I'll glue my body blank together using pretty much the same process. It just requires a little bit more glue. Tight bond wood glue will set up pretty quick, and typically you can get away with clamping it for about an hour, and at which point you can remove it from the clamps. However, with a body blank, since it's 1.5 inches thick, I think it's a good idea to leave it clamped longer, and it certainly doesn't hurt. So once I have all the clamps in place and I'm satisfied that the 2 boards are flat with one another and that neither one is riding up on the other, I'll tighten up those pipe clamps, and then I'll probably let it sit overnight before I remove the clamps, and I can proceed with the CNC operations of cutting the body, the neck, and the fretboard. All of the blanks are now ready for the next step of the process, which is going to be cutting out all the shapes on my CNC machine. I have a body blank, I have a book matched top blank, a bird's eye maple fretboard blank, and then an Eastern Rock maple neck blank with an angled headstock. And of course, I also have a little control cavity blank. Well, that's all the time I have for this episode. And in the next episode, I hope to get started at the CNC machine, cutting out all the different shapes. And I'll show you all that's involved in that process. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, make sure you give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, post them down below and I'll try to answer them. And if you don't already subscribe, hit that subscribe button. And when you do, you'll see that little bell icon. And if you click that, you'll get a notification via email every time I post a new video. And that's usually about once a week. So I hope you have a great weekend, a great week ahead, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.